Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is Gemma Louise Art, as she goes on social media, and we're going to be discussing art therapy. So, hello and welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm intrigued by this, to be honest. It was one of those ones I had to look into it and kind of like understand like actually what it is. So I think I'll start with that. I'll start with an introduction for those who don't know. So art therapy, this is according to the British Association of Art Therapists. Art therapy is an established form of psychotherapy delivered by trained art therapists, also known as art psychotherapists. Art therapy uses art as the primary mode of expression alongside talking with an art therapist. It aims to reduce distress and improve social, emotional, and mental health by promoting insight, self-compassion, and a sense of agency and self-worth. During art therapy, you are supported by an art therapist to use art to express and articulate often complex thoughts and feelings through art making. This may be following difficult or traumatic experiences which may be hard to talk about. I don't think I've ever said the word art that many times in my entire life. So mad. How did you come across this art therapy as a concept?
So basically, I came across it very young because I actually had a family member that actually had a drama therapist. Because you can also have drama therapists, you can have music therapists. There's lots of different forms of therapy that involve creative arts in some shape and form. And so he used to access that, and it was great for him for his mental health. And I was exposed to one of his sessions, which was interesting. So it's always been in the back of my mind. And then I naturally was drawn to art. So I did my degree in fine art and everything. And originally I thought I was going to go into teaching. Had my toe in the door with that and was working in education for a bit. And I just naturally gravitated to using art in sessions with young people that were obviously struggling, had certain things going off at home and stuff like that, to help them talk and navigate those thoughts and like help them improve with their place in like the traditional school system. And yeah, it's been on my radar for many years, and it's only lately that I'm now officially studying. So I am now a training art psychotherapist, which is great. And yeah, it was quite a battle to get onto it, but it was a worthy one. So, but yeah.
So in general, how does this work? Like, do you kind of sit down and paint something and someone asks you questions? Is that kind of how that works?
Yes and no. So basically, you can do pretty much anything, like art-wise. So typically, you'll have like a range of materials, and it could be paint, it could be pastels, it could just be pen and paper, it could be actually making something with clay or things like that. However, whatever way you want to express yourself. Sometimes it could even be a session where you don't actually have art making, you just rather talk. Or sometimes it could just be a session where you're just making art and not talking at all. It's very, different with how you navigate that at first. And with that, normally there's a conversation to like, just little bits of chit chat essentially, just to get to know you at first and things like that. And as that relationship develops between client and therapist, those issues that or topics that you want to like discuss and go about get brought up naturally. It's not the case of like we're just sat there and critiquing your work or anything like that in like a traditional art view. It's more, or how is that process, and are you enjoying what you're doing, or how looking back on things. And so it's different from like a conventional art world way of viewing art. It's more about focusing on the expression and like, the functionality of that kind of thing.
So if there are sessions where people aren't talking and they're just making their art, like what is the point of a session like that? I mean, let's suppose you've got someone who's, I don't know, they're dealing with a lot, and you just have a series of sessions and they're not speaking and they're just making the art. I mean, what's that achieving?
Well, first of all, it's like an intimate space. You're sharing that space with that person. and you're building that trust essentially. Some people, it depends who you are as a person, how quickly you are to discuss what's going on and those feelings and things like that. And as like art psychotherapists or therapists, we try and engage with you, we try and ask questions here and there, but we're not going to push you or back you into a corner. It's slowly open yourself up kind of thing. And with those sessions where a client just sits there and just does art making, in actuality, the fact that you're doing art making can tell us quite a lot about, you as a person and what's going off. Like, say you're making something, but you're trying to hide it away. It shows that you're putting boundaries up, you're putting those walls up, and you're still trying to feel out. Whereas someone that's like openly, sharing that and everything, it shows that, you do want to share something, but maybe you're not able to articulate it yet or not sure how to. And you're slowly learning how to process that to be able to then say that in a later session.
Playing devil's advocate, I mean,
Go on.
If you're trying to obviously help someone with therapy, then you have to ask the uncomfortable questions.
Yes.
Well, it is important to make someone feel comfortable and obviously build that trust, as you mentioned. Sooner or later, they need to start answering some questions. I'm not saying like it has to be like, right, tell me this, tell me your deepest, innermost thoughts. But if you're going to go to a therapy session, you have to be prepared to talk. Like, that's kind of the whole point, right? So like how...
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? That's something I'm struggling with here, because it's like, I understand the whole activity side of things. Sometimes that helps. Like, you see content creators, like artists, sometimes they'll be like painting and then like talking about a really complex issue, or like one of the ones that I found interesting, which isn't really, it's not like therapy based, but it's just interesting in more recent years, is when women do like makeup on streams, and they'll talk about often like really harrowing experiences while they're just like doing their and it looks so casual, like, when I was 5 I got abused, like that, and it's like, Jesus Christ. But for whatever reason it works for them, because they feel comfortable. I suppose an element of it is control, like that, or I can control my makeup and I can control my thoughts. I don't know, I'm just theorizing here, like, but where's, I guess what I'm asking is, where's the line, like, where you can start pushing? Because obviously every patient's going to be different. I imagine a lot of people are like fully understanding that they're going to have to talk, but for the people that don't talk, like, where's the point where you can start pushing?
It's honestly on a case-by-case basis, because obviously every client's different. And honestly, when a person comes into to a session and they start that journey of art therapy, sometimes you may have a context as to why, sometimes you may not. It could be, you find that out obviously along the journey. And with pushing that, normally you try those little feeler questions in the beginning and see how you're going to get on. But obviously, if you get to like say 6 sessions in and nothing's like kind of progress, you then have to reevaluate, maybe consider whether art therapy is the right thing for that person. Maybe they need something a bit more, whatever, like more, not more intense, but like a different avenue kind of thing. And throughout all the sessions, we will try and intervene and try and ask those questions and see what different reactions we'll get. So obviously, if it gets to the point where it's like so many sessions in, then we may need to evaluate and just ask them, what do you feel like you're getting out of these sessions? Do you feel like this is doing you, do you feel like this is helping you? Or, I've noticed this is, you haven't really been talking much. And, we'll have those open conversations with our clients and try and get that feedback from them. But yeah, so it's very case-by-case basis, basically.
Who is art therapy for?
Everyone, genuinely. It could be for those that are very young, it could be for those that are very old, in the middle. From the clients that I've seen case studies on and stuff like that, like it could be like, for example, those that have Alzheimer's, those with mental health. We've also have like children as well that are maybe like, growing up in certain systems or things like that. Hospital patients, those with terminal illnesses. There's quite a lot of avenues that it does adapt to. It can be in a hospital setting, it can be in a school setting. It can even be over Zoom these days, which is also interesting. So, there's quite a lot of different ways that you can adapt and cater to different client groups. So
with people that are terminally ill or dying, what's the purpose there? Is it to like help them accept death?
Essentially, that's part of it, because obviously, so for example, there was an exhibition I went to that was at a hospice, that was about art therapy that they deliver at that hospice. And at that exhibition, it showed you like what they created in the first session, what they created in the middle session, and what they created in the last session. And throughout that journey, it's, you know, getting them to accept what's happened. Processing time is a significant thing with those that are in that situation. But also, you know, allowing those emotions to come out as well. You know, it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to, you know, this, that, and the other. And, you know, it's actually been quite beneficial in some ways to like help those people in those situations to come to terms with, you know, what unfortunately life has handed them. Obviously, it's not the cure to, you know, the inevitable issue at the end, but it's something that they can go, you know what, I've been able to process this in a certain way. I'm going to have these ups and downs days and so on. But I've got a better understanding of myself and how to, you know, help regulate that.
What would you say are the main ways that art therapy helps as opposed to standard therapy?
So going into my personal experience, so many years ago, I've had traditional talking therapy where you're sat in a room and it's just you and the therapist, yeah? I think it can be confrontational to some people, especially if they haven't been in a therapy setting before, because there's nothing to kind of divide that, you know, attention, that full attention away. With the benefit of having art therapy, you're essentially got what's called the art therapy triangle. So you've got your client at one point, you've got the therapist at the other point, and then you've got the art making as your third point. So it's this nice little triangle that kind of goes back and forth between each other. And by having that, for someone that maybe finds that scenario or setting of just having that straight line being, you know, too much in a way, which it can be for some people, they've actually got this little third avenue that they can go into to help break that divide. So it means that, you know, so the therapist can interact with the work in terms of, you know, evaluating it, looking at it, and like, you know, asking them about the materials and stuff like that. But it can also help the client be like, I've talked to you about this thing, but actually I can't quite get into words about this other nuance to this thing I've discussed, but I'm able to draw it out for you, or I'm able to, you know, it will come from the unconscious mind with these drawings or paintings or whatever we do. So I would say in a way it's a bit more, there's more of an icebreaker, so to speak, with it. But obviously everybody's different. Everyone, you know, approaches therapy in different ways. Some people, you know, that conventional therapy of just one-to-one can work with others, you know, whether that be over the phone, in person, etc. Others, they may need that extra thing, such as art therapy, drama therapy, etc.
What did you get from art therapy?
As part of my studies, I have to actually access art therapy. So any art therapist that is trained, part of their training is while they're on placement, they have to access art therapy so that, you know, they can understand what it's like from the client's perspective who's receiving art therapy. But also if there's any issues that may come up in sessions, it's more of a little check, because we're all human. We're not all, you know, invincible to everything. Everyone will have something. And, you know, that goes for any therapist as well. You know, we're not, you know, all perfect. And in my sessions of art therapy, I have mine over Zoom, for example. So it'll be like this. I'll have like a video conference with my mic and everything like that. And I'll typically have my stuff put my camera pointed to my face, with putting my art or whatever I'm making. I have like a little setup and stuff. And in those sessions, I've been able to understand my want to help people, which has been interesting to delve into more. I've been able to identify certain things and patterns as well with myself. Stuff that I'm already aware of, but it's made the understanding of that, you know, more cemented, which has been good. And in all honesty, it's given me an appreciation of stuff that I've created in the past as well when I look back. So I do painting and stuff and that normally in my own art career. And it's made me look back at my paintings and actually understand why there's certain themes that crop up in my artwork and, certain topics that also crop up as well. So it's been quite interesting from that side of things as well. Obviously, as time goes on, as I carry on through this training and everything, there may be more things that come up and more lessons I learn. That's just the natural progression of it. But I'd say that's about roughly what I've got so far. But yeah.
What would you say are the biggest challenges associated with art therapy?
I think number one is getting to people to understand what it is. I think that's number one big challenge. And that is for every creative, unconventional therapy, I feel like, as well. As well as breaking down the boundary, of who it is actually for. Some people may view it as only something that's accessible to young people or children, for example, because of the form of therapy it is. But actually it's for all ages. And in terms of the other sides of it, of so for example, I mentioned the Zoom thing, how can something like that be accessible over online? And it's becoming something that's actually more common these days. And although you haven't got that, sat in the same room togetherness kind of thing, which does add to the, therapy relationship, there are actually ways to adapt to different environments as well. So it's not it's a cookie cutter thing and this is all it has to be. It's a one size fits all kind of thing, which is good.
Are you not missing on the kind of the energy and the vibe though? Because I feel like if you're receiving any kind of therapy, you're talking to a stranger about traumatic moments in your life, difficult things you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And as you said, you have to build up trust over time. Can you really do that over a Zoom call versus physically being in a room with someone?
Some people can, some people can't. Obviously, it's dependent on how everybody is. I can say in my personal experience, I have been able to tackle some of those subjects. But obviously other people may want that actual environment to have that in. So it's not in their own home space, which I can completely sympathise and understand. It's a case by case. Most of these things, it's a case by case basis. It's dependent on who you are as a person, whether you're comfortable tackling that in your own space or whatever you set up kind of thing for those sessions via Zoom. If you're not comfortable with that, there are options to have those face-to-face options and, whether that be, through, there's an actual, you can have places in hospitals, for example, that have art therapy places. There's also, lots of different community centres and everything like that have dedicated spaces to them now. For example, one of the therapists, they work in a bloody centre that has a dedicated art therapy section there with their own room and materials and stuff. There's lots of different ways that it can be accessed. It's just dependent on you as a person. I would say try both, personally, and see what works for you. Personally, I am doing a bit of both. But for my lifestyle, it's more easier for me to have it via Zoom, which is why I'm doing it that way for my training. So you've got to look at your lifestyle and what you need and what you reciprocate as a person kind of thing in those kind of situations and environments.
Do art therapists tend to charge a lower price point for Zoom sessions versus physical sessions?
Yeah, they can do. Definitely. So mine are cheaper, for example, for Zoom sessions rather than physical sessions. But obviously the caveat to that is you will use your own materials because it's a Zoom session. So there's obviously that to keep in mind. I mean, luckily I have quite a lot of stuff because I'm naturally creative soul anyway. So I've got God knows how many materials. But obviously other people, they may just have a paper and pen. But it doesn't matter how many materials you have. Even if you just got a pen and paper, that's more than enough. Even just a piece of paper that you can just scrumple up or something, that's still art making.
So what's your approach to a typical art therapy session? walk me through like the structure and how that would go down.
My structure is basically I have my own dedicated space for it. I'm lucky enough to have that. It's in like a room that I do use as my workspace as well, so there is that conflict inside of it. So it's not the most ideal environment, but it's what I've got. I normally have like my materials around me or whatever, so that I'm not having to like constantly get up out of my chair and stuff to try and find something in a drawer somewhere or whatever, that I'm like, oh, I've got this. So it's accessible, so it's more comfortable. Have this kind of set up here that I've got now. And basically I just have that moment for myself before the session starts to just, you know, let whatever's happened like that morning and so on, just like calm myself down before I go into it. That's typically how I approach it. Some people may just go in straight after work or whatever. I have been guilty of doing that before. I know it's mind-boggling, but people can do it and do it sometimes. You know, whether I would personally say that's recommended, I don't know. I think you need that kind of breather to dissect that time.
I don't know if that would be a therapy session so much as just listening to a guy rant about how much he hates his fucking job for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Some
people can be like that. And you know what? Sometimes that rant can be useful. And, you know, they may just need to get that initial thing off their chest to then get into it. But obviously, ideally, do it around the time where you're free and so on and everything like that. So I purposely schedule it so that I have time free and so on, like just a little bit beforehand for me to mentally prepare. Because sometimes it can be rough, sometimes it can be a good session. You don't know what's going to come up, I'll be honest. Sometimes there may be something that I actually want to talk about. Sometimes I just go in blind and like I end up talking about something that I never thought I was going to bring up. It can be completely random. And that's pretty much the setup. And normally at the end, she gives me timers, so it'll be like, we've got like 15 minutes left of this session. We'll give 10 minutes. We've got 5 minutes, just so it's not an abrupt end. And you know, in that time, it gives me time to kind of like decompress, unwind, settle back, know that I've, you know, talked about whatever, and kind of just essentially have this like self-meditation in a way of like relaxing my body and so on after discussing whatever I've discussed.
I imagine when you're looking at the art produced, that probably gives you a bit of an insight into the patient's mind. So is there any instances where it's like disturbing and maybe it like that becomes a talking point? Like, oh, I see you've produced this disturbing art. Let's discuss that.
Yeah, so sometimes it can come up. So as part of our training, we have group sessions at uni. And with that, we actually get to practice this skill of, you know, talking openly about our art and so on. And there have been times where I've looked at other people's art and gone, that's triggered this for me, or I think it actually looks like this compared to what they're saying, you know. And it's just a case of, you know, oh, I've seen you've produced, you know, talk to me what you've done, you know, talk to me about the process of how you've made this and so on, and going step by step as to how they got to that end result, and going, oh, you know, what's the intention for like why you've cut it in this with like a Stanley knife, for example. Like, why have you done it with a Stanley knife rather than a pair of scissors, or like tearing it with your hands or stuff like that? Because people do. They gravitate to all sorts of different things, honestly. And you've got to ask these questions, as silly as they may sound. But honestly...
excuse me, sir, why have you painted this in your blood? I'm concerned.
Things like that, if it was something like that scenario, obviously that's where safeguarding and stuff like that comes in. Right. And we would say, you know, we would obviously, once we notice that, we would stop that and be like, look, we've got some concerns. And we would obviously escalate that in those kind of situations like you brought up there.
You ever witness anything like that? Like where it goes too far and you have to kind of end the session?
Not in this current journey that I'm on, but like when I've worked in education and I've like made art with like younger kids, I have seen things that I've gone, that's brought up a certain theme that I'm concerned about. I need to raise that because I'm not doing my duty of care and diligence if I don't. And, you know, you have to, that's one of the first things you have to disclose with any client, which is, you know, if there's something that I think that it's going to cause you harm, or if I think you're going to cause harm to someone else, you know, I have to raise that, and I have to, you know, do my due diligence to make sure that at the end of the day, you've got the right support around you, or maybe you need something, you know, extra to support you through whatever, you know, has come up. So it's something that, you know, can come up at any time for any therapist, you know, regardless of what type of therapist you are. But it's, you know, you need to do your due diligence with that. But yeah, anything that severe where, you know, there's that the blood thing or whatever you just mentioned, yeah, we would stop that, I think, as soon as we noticed, and go, we need to deal with this.
When you're going through due diligence, like, so what kind of things are you going through? What are you looking at when you're going through that process?
Basically, it's just, obviously, you know, depending what comes up. So it's like dotting the T's and crossing the T's and dotting the I's even. So, you know, if it's anything to do with like stuff at home that I think needs to be reported, what way do I report that? Making sure they've got a safe space if they haven't got a safe space to go back to after the session. You got to do all these things. And for example...
Well, that's a really good point. If I might interject, like, okay...
Yeah, go ahead.
If it's in their space and you're doing a Zoom call, it's not a controlled environment. So what can you really do? If they've, for instance, if they like hurt themselves on camera and you see that, like, what can you really do?
Report it as soon as. So if they did hurt themselves, it would obviously be, you know, emergency services and stuff. We would, before that, the sessions would begin with a Zoom session. You know, we have them fill in a form which discloses, you know, where the Zoom sessions would be taking place. So, you know, if it's at the home or whatever, if they've got an emergency contact, we ask them to give them their details so that we can contact them in the first instance. There's all these prerequisites that are done. And so that if a situation like that should arise, we've got all the necessary information to go straight away. Right, I can see this has happened, and I need to do this, and, you know, make sure you get the right care and support and help that you need right now. You know, so I am going to do that. So it's the case of going through that information that you've got and going, right, I've got the address, I've got this, and so on. Going through, contacting all those people, getting the support in place.
What's more effective? Like a group therapy, can't fucking speak today. What's more effective, a group art therapy session or a one-to-one art therapy session?
Both can be. Again, it's another one of those, it's dependent on you as a person. I think in training it's good to have group as well as individual, because by having group you can see how other people explain their work, talk about it, how people may question others about, oh, why did you make this decision? Why did you do this? Oh, I this is just a projection, but I think it looks like this, or I can see this image in it. That's kind of helpful to have other people's insight as you're going through that training process. But also can just be beneficial in general if you don't want to go through that journey alone. It depends how open of a person you are, whether you're comfortable in a group environment, I guess. And then obviously individual, you've got that one person to yourself, which some people may find a comfort in that. Some people may think that's still a bit too much and may prefer the group approach. It's a bit of a, you know, which way do you want to go kind of thing.
What have you found?
And there are ways to try it.
Effective.
For me, I think the individual stuff has been more effective personally. And that's because being in a training environment with the group stuff, I'm not going into the sessions I'm going to make this today. That's not my approach with the group sessions. It's more, I'll make whatever and I'll talk about it. And sometimes there can be projections from other people that may not be helpful. Other times there can be projections that are helpful. So, you know, that cloudiness from, you know, the unhelpful projections can kind of clog up with what you think the image represents and actually what you've discovered about yourself during this process and everything like that. And obviously, you know, in a group environment where you're all sat around in a circle going one by one talking about your work, you know, there's more of a spotlight as well on you in a way when you're talking about those things. Whereas an individual, it's like it's my own contained space. So for me, that feels more secure personally.
Are there any particular forms of art that are more effective in getting people to discuss their problems or feelings?
I wouldn't say there's any specific form of art that's effective, because any form of art can be effective, basically. It's just dependent on, what resources are available to you, I guess, is what that comes under. I mean, for me, my natural is always picking up a paintbrush. That's been my number one go-to, because I like being able to like make something abstract or whatever, or sometimes I do actual literal images. But
I mean, you said though that you lay out a bunch of materials on the table and people pick. So like, let me frame the question another way. What's the most common thing that people reach for when they enter that room?
If I'm looking back on the group sessions, so we have all these materials basically the same, I'd say a lot of stuff that people pick up are pastels and oil pastels, because it's like something that you can make a lot of different marks with. You can be quite delicate with it, or you can just make a mess with it. You do see people pick up paint as well, but it's not that often. A lot of things that I've seen is quite a lot of collage stuff in the group sessions as well. So there'll be like a pile of like a bunch of old magazines, papers, etc. And people just will want to search through, and they may find an image in that book or a piece of writing or whatever that might gravitate to them, and they decide, I want to incorporate that in this. So those are like the main three that I've seen. But I have, there's still other odd ones here and there. Like some people like using, like sewing, for example. So they'll like get fabric and actually make something, like a soft toy or things like that. Some people use sand tray, where it's like something that's not permanent. So basically it's like a tray of sand, and they have like different objects or whatever that they put on, and they make like a little scene.
Is there anything crazy you've seen, like weird, like a bit out there?
I wouldn't say crazy, just different to how I would make things, I guess. It's different seeing how other people create art and seeing what that output is. Like, you could see something and go, I think that just looks like a few things that you've just cut a few things out of, and you just crumpled it up and it just looks like a piece of rubbish. Like, you could just, see stuff like that. But then when you hear them talk to you and explain, this is what I did, and then I did this, and I didn't like how I was doing that, so then I decided to do this decision instead. It was like, it starts to make more sense. And then other times I can see stuff and I'm like, that's a bit odd. But okay, I guess because dreams come up a lot naturally. Yeah, like stuff they're like, I wanted to make this image that I saw in my dream. And like they'll talk to you about this like vivid dream they had, and you're like, that's quite a crazy dream. Good job trying to put that on a piece of paper or whatever. But it's a bit odd, I guess. But it'll take a bit of getting re-listening and looking at it to understand it more. So,
are there any risks associated with art therapy?
In terms of what do you mean? Like in terms of risk to self or risk to others? Like
anything. What are the risks involved?
Well, obviously, there's quite a lot of topics that can be brought up, and sometimes that can be too much for a person, so to speak. And so that can be a risk in general, but that's with any general therapy, I feel. Depending what environment you're working in, there can be a risk. For example, art therapy is used in prisons as well, with groups. So there's that risk factor depending what group of prisoners you're working with as well. But obviously there'll be certain risk assessments that are carried out, so you don't have certain things in the room that would cause harm to people and things like that. And also there's the risk of, in a group environment, how one person in that group might react to what somebody has put out as well. So it's, about gauging that and making sure, hopefully, that everyone understands that, whatever's said in here is a private space. It stays in this room, what's said within the group. If I feel like something or whatever needs to be raised, I, as the, therapist of that group, would, take whatever necessary interventions with that. It's quite a lot of different things.
When would someone be referred art therapy?
Could be music therapy as well.
Any. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
Let's suppose you're waiting for therapy on the NHS, or I don't know, it's general triage. You're talking to a physician and you're like, okay, well, I need some therapy. When would that happen? When would you be referred that? Or like, how does that happen, essentially?
So with the NHS, obviously, they gravitate to the first talking therapies, whether it's over a phone, in person. You've also got CAM service as well for those that are younger, things like that. And so there's different approaches, you know, those are the typical first approaches in any NHS journey. You know, if that isn't working, you know, you should obviously feed that back to who referred you for that. And, you know, that's when the question is brought up of, well, if that type of therapy isn't working, let's see what other avenues are. It's not typically the first choice that the NHS would typically choose. Sometimes it can be, you know, they may look at your records if you've had therapy in the past and know that it hasn't worked, that it may come up as a first option then. It's dependent, really. Most of the stuff can be private referrals as well. And, you know, some people, you know, may just fund it themselves too. It's the case of, basically, it's trying to get more people to understand that there is other options of therapy as well, kind of thing. That's part of the struggle with creative therapy, I guess. But it is becoming a more prevalent thing, especially in the age of, well, I don't want to say it's become a more common thing, but I think it's become a more recognised thing that this is something that is happening, which is there's a lot more neurodivergence in younger population. That's becoming more prevalent. And I don't think it's something that's, it's only just starting now. I think it's always been there, it just hasn't been identified, which is why you have adults in later life now getting late diagnosis of, you know, whether it's autism, ADHD, etc. And with neurodivergence, it's creative therapies or not typical talking therapies or whatever, you know, are typically recommended over normal standard talking therapy these days. So it's growing and adapting with how the way that everyone's like developing over time and how the times have changed, essentially. So
what are the biggest success stories you've seen with art therapy?
I'm going to go back to one from the exhibition. There was a wonderful client. So they give them all different fake names and everything like that to obviously protect their anonymity and stuff. And they went by R. And they had given a diagnosis of terminal cancer. And at first they were very angry in the first sessions. And they just couldn't accept it. They were just like, everything's against me. They had severe depression, you know, they didn't want to sit and talk or anything like that. They were just very closed off and just not wanting to accept reality, essentially. And with this, you know, it was a lot, and they actually recommended them, you know, we've got you approved for these art therapy sessions through the hospice, you know, give it a try, see what happens. And at first they wouldn't go in on their own, they would go in with their partner. So their partner would just sit while they were in their space, and, you know, they would just let them make art. And at first they would make art in the corner of the room as far away from the therapist as possible, because they didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to accept, they weren't ready to have that journey yet of acceptance and processing the news that they've received and what was the inevitability. And eventually, as it got to like the third session and then started not going into that corner, they actually came to the table that the therapist was sat and actually started creating in front of them and openly showing what they were doing. And part of that was because every week they would leave whatever they made thinking it was a mess, because they would just chuck like paint everywhere all over the table, like just spill anything they could. And, you know, they would just look at that as a mess. But as part of one of the duties of an art therapist, they kept that piece of artwork and they kept it safe. And they made sure to bring it out every session, whatever they made, so that they knew that whatever you create here, whatever, I'm not just going to chuck it away and throw it in a bin. I'm going to keep it safe for you. I'm going to make sure that it's looked after and so on. So having seen that and identified that, they were like, okay, I'll open up and, you know, share this experience with you of what I'm making. And what started out as big spills ended up becoming actually quite dainty bits of, like, they did drawings of trees and stuff, and like nature and stuff growing or stuff like decaying and things like that. And it was as if they were recognising their growth was being stunted, which was quite interesting in that journey. And eventually, by the time it got to the halfway, they were actually starting to talk and go, this isn't right, this isn't fair, and getting all that emotion. And eventually they were able to attend sessions without their partner in the room and be able to openly express themselves. And then at the end, the last image that they made, it was a tree, and it had like leaves that were all made with gold leaf. And it was a pure, wonderful picture of like acceptance of like, it's bloomed into this final form of their reality, but they've accepted that and they've taken the chance to embrace that as they can. And that was quite powerful, that they've been able to go from something where they just want to hide away and shut away from the world, and then eventually opened up and bloom and grow like this tree had in the end. So it, you know, to me, that was quite a powerful thing. And this client openly talked about their journey at the exhibition with them. I actually got to meet them, which was great. And, you know, you could see the difference when they were looking at what they made that was on display, and see how they've got started and now have like come to this point of where they go, right, I'm gonna embrace what I've got left and go from there. Quite moving stuff.
Thanks for sharing. Really, really incredible stuff. How do I follow that?
Sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, it's. I guess what I was looking for really is to understand like why a person would go for this type of therapy, and I suppose in instances like that, it's pretty powerful, especially when you don't see the point anymore. Because I mean, like, maybe that's the point. Maybe this sort of therapy is for people that are in those kind of situations. Because traditional therapy, you know, what are you going to talk about? Like, you're going to just talk about how it's fucking shit. Like, yeah, I'm about to die. Fucking brilliant. This is unfair. Like, it might work for some people, but I doubt it. It's very difficult to get to that level of acceptance if you can get there. But then something like that, where you can tap into something, I guess, that's a bit more, I don't know. It takes your mind off things, doesn't it? I suppose.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, the way that art therapy started in the very beginning, so this is going back to like the 1940s, believe it or not, Adrian Hill, he's a big name, and the person that first termed the phrase art therapy in the UK. And it was around a similar time frame that America did the same, but with another person called Margaret Nornberg. And Adrian Hill, he actually used art therapy for patients that were battling tuberculosis. So this was after, obviously, the World War. And basically, he shared the use of art making as a form of escape. And he would suggest that it's like an art germ, so it can combat all these other germs that were plaguing your psyche, your brain, everything that's going off, you know, with your mental health and stuff. But also it could combat stuff with the physicality of patients, you know, how their posture would change, how they would go about life and things like that. And it, you know, he promoted it to be a healing process. So it is used quite a lot with, you know, people like in hospice and stuff like that. It is used throughout all out, but in terms of patients or clients like that, rather, it has seen quite a significant growth with those people.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is escapism. I can think of times when I've had like the worst times ever, and I just grabbed my guitar and started playing. It didn't fix the problem, but it kind of soothes you in a way, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. It does. And, you know, there's lots of different theories that go along with it as well. There's obviously psychology theories that go into it. So you have typical big names like Freud, for example. There's a big theory of transference that is applied in art therapy, where you have transference and counter-transference, so the transference is you transferring an emotion or an experience or something onto somebody else, and the counter-transference is their counter-transferring back with what they've like processed and got from what you've passed over, and they've took this and gone, right, so I'm going to ask you like, oh, so why did you make it like this? Or, you know, you mentioned this person, can you tell me a bit more about that person? You know, lots of openness and everything like that. There's then the biggest theorist, who I personally swing in the way towards him, is Jung, Carl Gustav Jung. So he actually had quite a good friendship with Freud, ironically, but they actually had a falling out towards the end, because they differed on their views and everything like that. But what Jung's kind of accepts is that there's stuff in the unconscious that gets brought forward. So it's the stuff that we've pushed back essentially, and we don't want to deal with it, and is not in the forefront of our mind. But actually, it is back there, and it does come forth in all these different images and ways that we approach life as well, which is quite interesting. But yeah, it's essentially a form of escapism. By doing that, by allowing yourself to escape it, naturally brings stuff forward that you weren't expecting to be brought forward.
What has art therapy taught you about life?
It's not cookie cutter, it's not simple. It's never like that. There's always something to somebody as well. It honestly, and it's the most simplest lessons ever, but it's true. And I think it's like giving me a greater understanding of it now, because like I would honestly, when I look at the stuff that I was doing and everything like that, I'd be like, yeah, I've just done this because, I like the way it moved or whatever, and I like the colours. But then I go, actually, I can see why I've got such repetition with this, and actually I can identify that with that part of my life, and, actually I have been pushing this back in my mind and so on, and, you know, we're not all perfect and we're all flawed in a way and everything like that. But also, it's taught me that, you know, anyone can be creative as well. You don't have to be, you know, an amazing artist like Van Gogh or whatever. Anyone has the capability to create something. It doesn't matter what your skill ability is. We all have that ability to create. And that process itself can be something that can be one of the most relieving to do. But yeah.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
In terms of my journey and so on, it's all going to go back to stuff, like in terms of art, it's to do with stuff at school and things I was told. So, for example, I got told I couldn't create art if I couldn't buy a sketchbook that day because I didn't have the money for it. And I was just like, I can create art though, because technically anything can be art if you think about it. That was
Did you say the line like, anything can be art?
No, it's not teenager me.
Excuse me?
I should have done. But no, she was like, well, if you can't buy a sketchbook, you can't do art. And I was...
Wow.
Yeah.
What a statement.
Yeah. It was a statement. And I was just like, okay. And just like, was in shock, and, you know, made me naturally upset at the time, looking back on teenage me back then. But then in a way, I proved her wrong later, because then I went on to create art that didn't need a sketchbook. So, you know, it was just interesting. And, you know, I've been taught, and there's lots of different things like that have come up about misconceptions with art and everything in general, which obviously naturally feeds into art therapy. Like, I got told that something I thought was painted in, what I thought I painted in love, I got told in a classroom full of peers that what I painted was actually not painted in love. And I was just like...
The fuck does that mean?
So I was talking about, you know, this reminded me of my family, and like getting to see both of my parts of my family, because like I basically painted a road sign, and this road sign would be, right, I'm halfway to seeing my mum, or I'm halfway to seeing my dad. So when I looked at that sign, it was, I'm close to seeing them or whatever. And they said to me, they were like, I don't think you painted that in love. And it wrecked me. And that was...
I'm sorry, but that's such a bullshit thing to say to someone.
Thank you.
Oh, it's not painted in love. Like, what the fuck did you know about that? What do you mean?
Yeah,
I was not paid in love.
And you can imagine, it was in a group full of peers. This was my first year at university doing my fine art degree, this was. And it wrecked me. And ironically, I refused to pick up a paintbrush for the rest of my degree. I didn't pick up a paintbrush again until 2020 during lockdown. And then I went back to painting. Because that was the one thing that got me through COVID, was doing art, ironically. And now I'm doing art therapy. But yeah, it completely put me off. And from that, I was just like, you know, saying comments like that, that's like one of the worst things you can do. That's one of the worst things that you can say. And I took that as a bit of advice to myself of going forward in these sessions when I'm with clients. I will never approach it in that manner. I will never do that.
This is why anytime I meet someone and they're a bit younger than me, or not necessarily younger, but like you've seen in some of my streams, sometimes you get people like, oh, should I do this? Should I get into this? And I'm like, yeah, fucking go for it. Do it. Yeah. Do the thing. You know, oh, what if it doesn't work out? Who cares? Let's just try. Because I, you know, like yourself, I had a similar school experience, and I saw people get spoken to that way. I got spoken to that way, and you know, it really begs, like, when you put it into context, it's like, okay, the people teaching you didn't want to be there. They were getting drunk in the middle of the day, and they were hungover, and they were just in a shit mood, and they're taking out and projecting shit onto you. Like, I had teachers talking about like their failing marriages and projecting their fucking hatred for children onto. It's like, why the fuck are you in teaching? Yeah. Like, what's wrong with you? But then, you know, they just, all the teachers are going to come at me, but it's like the old saying, those who can't teach, you know. And don't get me wrong, there are some amazing teachers out there, and I've spoken about shout out to Mr. Nelly, my business teacher, who like really just changed a lot for me. There are those amazing human beings that absolutely were born to be teachers, and other things in life. And then you've got these people who just have no business being anywhere near teaching, and it's because of shit like that. It's like, you know, maybe sometimes we can remember the specific words said to us, but a lot of the time it's like you might not remember what was said, but you remember how it made you feel. Yeah. And I've had that over the years. I've had people close to me, family members, whoever, just say things to me like, you know, your head's in the clouds, you're tone deaf, you'll never be able to sing. And, you know, you just keep proving people wrong. And then it becomes, because I think the key with this as well, for anyone listening who has either gone through this or going through this, the key is to not be bitter. Take the thing that hurt you, work at it, prove whoever wrong. They ultimately won't care. They probably won't remember they even said that to you. Like, if you found that teacher, just for argument's sake, and you're like, how dare you say this to, like, you said this to me, they'd be like, who are you? Oh, sorry. Oh, did I say that? Like, because people like that don't think. They just say shit and then don't worry about the consequences. But that's the thing. It's like, it affects people on such a big level. Like, this is why they say that words are power, because you never know what your words, like how much gravity your words have with a person. You know, your words could like change someone's life, or give them the hope they need to keep going, or inspire them to do something fantastic, or even just push them in the right direction, you know, or remind them of something, you know. Like, there's so much to it. There really is. Yeah,
there definitely is. But like, and I learned with that experience, it put me off painting, but then later I came back to it. And I embraced it, and if it wasn't for painting, I wouldn't have got to where I am now, ironically enough. And it's just like, it's a big fuck you to him, in a way, as I like to say to myself.
It's a good word.
And then with the whole sketchbook fiasco, I've proven, I'm like, I don't need a sketchbook. Christ, I used to do performance art. Like, anything can, you know.
You should write a book and that be the title. I think there's money to be made there.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't need a sketchbook to create art. There you go. What's the best advice you've ever received?
It sounds so stupid and simple, but just take a moment to breathe. Because that is something that I've been learning a lot, is just to take a moment to breathe. Because sometimes I can get really caught up in something and I just go, and I go on this tangent and keep going. And I've been learning to take a step back and just sit for a minute and just breathe, digest, and then I've gone, right, actually my thoughts are a bit more together now, and I'm not going to go in this big tangent and whatever, go with the wind. And that's the best bit of advice I can give, genuinely, is to just take that moment. You know, because there's so many things that can clog your brain, and this is anybody, that just taking that moment for yourself just to have that time. And it is essentially processing time, but just having that, it can make things a lot clearer.
To be fair, if you don't breathe, you'll die. So
yeah, that as well. But yeah, because I'd be like, could see all these things in one breath.
It's true. I've been trying it out recently.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes when I have like really stressful days at work, I always disassociate when I'm there anyway, because I just can't believe it's my life. But I'm like, sometimes I'm trying to, I guess, center myself, and so I'll do it, and it does actually work a little bit. Like not completely, because I'm still in hell, but it's, I don't know, it's like someone threw a little bit of water over you for a second, and you weren't burning. You know?
Yes.
It's like, yeah.
Just alleviates the pressure in a way. As simple as that is.
What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
That I am flawed, and that's fine. Genuinely. I mean, a lot of people, that's a hard one to accept. That, you know.
Flawed.
Yeah, essentially. Because we all have our flaws. You know, there's always going to be something, essentially. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect person. There's no such thing as the ideal, you know. And with me, going through this journey, particularly because I'm being in this career where I'm helping people with their problems, and it's like, oh, well, if I'm helping people, surely I have to be 100% fine. No.
But don't they say like all therapists are in therapy? I've heard something like that before. Yeah,
so it is something that's actually recommended. Yeah, because, you know, sometimes you can be doing therapy sessions and you'd be fine. Sometimes someone can say something as a client in that session and it actually trigger you in some weird way. And so then you need to go and deal with that and figure out why that triggered a response in you, why that made you feel that way. And I have come to be able to identify, you know, the things in my life that are, I'd say flaws, but it's life experiences and so on, and these are the caveats that I have due to those life experiences. But I've come to accept them, and you know, sometimes they'll get the better of me like any normal human being. Sometimes I'm able to process that and deal with it and move along. It's just one of those things.
Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
At the minute, I'm just studying away, so working hard. Oh, bless you. So I'm currently doing my masters. I am trying to work on a new piece of body of work and stuff at the minute. So we'll be doing that, and hopefully, I'm trying to do more stuff that's like advocating, essentially, for stuff to do with art therapy, but also health in general. That's been a big thing of mine. Women's health has always been a big health of mine. So lots of stuff in the burner with that. But yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show once again and discussing art therapy with us. For those who don't know, Gemma was on the show earlier last year?
I think so, yeah.
Time is a construct, I don't know. It's been 6 years of this show now. 6 years.
Well done.
6 years.
That's an achievement in itself.
Something. No, anyway, I implore you to go check out that show as well, to give you some sort of more background context on Gemma, her work, her art, and everything in between. Thanks once again for being on the show. Real pleasure.
Thank you.
And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in another life when we are both cats. Goodbye.